So we've gone ahead and created an account controller, and we've added some different actions here. Let's focus on the login. So I'm going to go ahead and actually twirl close most of these other items here. And I'll even close my summary. Now, the first thing for me personally is I like to look at the lines of my code, and especially as I'm doing these tutorials, it's helpful for me to say, oh, this is on this line, this is on this line. So to enable line numbers down the side here, we're going to go up to the quick launch or search, and we're just going to type in line number. And Visual Studio will go through and it actually searches all of the config settings, and it says, oh, under settings you want to go to text editors, languages, general. So I'm going to click on that. And then once we're in here, I'm going to check this box that says line numbers. By checking that box and hitting OK, my line numbers appear. I really don't understand why they don't turn that on by default. You would think that as a programmer, especially when you're dealing with errors and they have specific line numbers, it would be nice to see the line numbers. But hey, that's just my opinion. So anyway, so we're going to go and focus on login. So let's start by creating the view for our login. So we'll right click in that action, we'll say add view. And Visual Studio will do its job of saying, hey, this action name was login, so the view name will also be login. The template, we'll leave an empty template for now, and we'll leave everything else as the defaults. So make sure your layout page is checked, and we'll hit add. So it will scaffold together for us a very simple blank view for our login action. So I'm going to go ahead and close controllers for the moment. Under views, I have a lot of different folders open. I'm going to twirl close most of those. And so now I'm just looking at my account controller actions, or I'm sorry, my account controller views, my login view for my login action. It all gets kind of jumbled at times. And let's focus on getting this built out. So the first thing I always like to do is know what kind of canvas, so to speak, I'm dealing with. So what I like to do first is I'm going to go ahead and click my play button to build and reload my page. Okay, so because I'm in my login view, it went ahead and directed me straight to that page. So it brought me to localhost 56354/account, because this is my account controller /login. So I'm at my login page. It's pretty bare. So what I want to do is I want to put the login boxes right here in this space. So to do that, I need to make those changes to my view, and then whatever HTML I put in the view will show up here in the actual web page. So let's go ahead and we will flip back to Visual Studio. We'll stop debug, and now we're back in to edit our page. So the way that I'm going to lay this out is, it may be similar, may be different to how you would do it. I'm going to go ahead and do a field set and a legend, and I'm going to say login page. And then what I'll do here is I will create a input of type text, and I'm going to give it a name. Now this name is important because that name will be the piece that links our web page to our C# code when we get to dealing with postback and sending the web page data back to the server. So I'm going to call this username, and then I'll put a new line, and then I'll add a second one, and this type will be the password type, and the name of it will also be password. Now we need to put some labels up front, so we'll do label username colon and label password colon. Now this is an overly simplistic login page, so if you're looking at this HTML and going, wow, that's really ugly, it is. But it's just a starting point. So then we'll come here and we'll say button type equals submit. The name of it will be login, and then we'll close that, and then we'll just call this the login button. Now I want to add a second thing here as well. Next to that, I want to put an A tag, and I'm going to point this to /account/create. Now this link will allow us to create our account if we don't have an account to log in with. And we'll say create an account. And we'll save. Now I've made changes to this page, and this is the view page. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit my play button again, rebuild and reload, and you're debugging a release build using just my code with release builds using compiler optimization results in degrade debugging experience. Let's see, I'm going to go ahead and continue debugging. So what this is saying is that we're running a release build of our app using just my code with release builds using compiler optimization. So using release builds does compiler optimization. So you want to optimize your code, you want to have the compiler optimize the code so that it runs as fast as possible when you release it or put it in production. This is saying that we're running using just my code. We're not actually doing a release build, we're in debug, so I'm not sure why this is saying this. But I'm going to go ahead and tell it to disable. Well, let's go ahead and actually say stop debugging for a minute. Let's go up to our build menu, and I'm going to clean the solution. So clean will go through and take all the compiled code and basically delete it. So we went to build, clean solution, deletes all of our compiled code, and then let's hit play again. I'm not sure why we got it that time, because we didn't get it the last 3 times, and nothing's really changed. So that just might be Visual Studio being special. So let's see. Everything looks good now, so I'm just going to kind of shove that off as Visual Studio kind of being its special self. And you'll see that sometimes. If you consider what Visual Studio is doing, it's a very complex application, and quite honestly, at times, it gets a little confused. It doesn't know what you're doing, what your intentions are. It's trying to be proactive. It's scanning your code, trying to make an analysis, and it's trying to be helpful, like it was there. And honestly, sometimes I think between NuGet packages that you're bringing into your application, system libraries, and other things, it just gets confused. It doesn't really always understand what it's doing, and these are written by people, so people make mistakes and things happen, and that's what you get. So sometimes you have to, I always like to say the rule of thumb is if you get a weird error, go back, do a clean like I showed you, and just do a rebuild and run it again. Sometimes doing that clean and that rebuild is enough to take care of things. Sometimes you even want to just close Visual Studio down completely. I had a lot of cases in prior terms where students would try to launch my version of an application, their own version of the application. They'd have 2 copies of Visual Studio open, and they would try to run theirs, and their changes weren't getting accepted. And after a lot of back and forth, we realized, oh, the issue is that you had 2 copies of Visual Studio open, and Visual Studio didn't really translate very well as to whether they should be using the teacher's code or the student's code, and sometimes those changes just got lost entirely. So closing down Visual Studio, opening up only the project you need, that ended up fixing the issue for a lot of the students. So sometimes just to shut it all down and bring it all back up, as silly as that sounds, is the best solution. Alright, so we now have our login page. We're actually missing one thing. So this login page, when you click login, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't go anywhere. And the reason for that is that we did not wrap this inside of an HTML form. So to do that, we'll flip back, and this field set really does nothing. Actually, it does nothing because we're running Bootstrap. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it. Instead, what it should do is it should draw a little box around the login page, but it didn't, so that's okay. So instead, I'm going to say we want a form, and the form will need a method, and that method is going to be a post. Now, a post is one of the 4 primary HTTP methods, and there's different ways of getting your content. So a post is where we take data and we send it to the server. We're posting data. A put is also another way of sending data, but typically post is the most common. You're posting data or sending data back to the server. A get is what happens when you make the call from the server to get a web page the first time. You're getting a web page. A post is you're posting data back. And then the action will be, where are we posting to? And for us, we're going to be posting to /account/login. So we'll be posting back to the same action that we came from. And you'll see how we differentiate those in the controller in just a minute. So we now have a form, and we want to take the closing part of that form tag and put it at the bottom. So here's the opening part, and then the closing part, the /form. And that wraps our controls. So I'm going to just save that. Since I'm in debug mode, you may have noticed that I'm not actually stopping and rebuilding. When you're editing views, these CS HTML pages, you do not have to go back and recompile. Only when you make changes to the controllers or any of your C# code. The views recompile and reprocess at runtime. So if I refresh here, there should be no visual changes made to the page. Oh, that login thing was apparently our field set. Either way, so here's our page. So I'm going to right click here real fast. I'm going to go to inspect. And the reason I want to do that is I want to just show you the actual C# or the HTML that's generated for this page. And I want you to see some of the parallels. So let me minimize the web page. And what you'll see here is there's a whole lot going on. Here's the HTML, the head, the body, some div tags. And all of this is coming from that underscore layout. That's all happening before this view. So this view starts out with this h2 tag. So this is the beginning of our view right here. This is the HTML that the browser gets from the server at the end. So here's our form. There's our form post to account/login, our username label, our username input text box, password label, password text box, and our submit button and our link. So if we flip back and look at the page itself, you can see the parallels. And actually with Chrome, I really like this. You can actually mouse over an element and it'll highlight it in the page. So you can see what each one of these elements or each one of these tags corresponds to a particular element. So now that we've wrapped these text boxes inside of a form tag, we can now click login and it'll cause a post back. It's pretty quick to see, but if you look at the fave icon up here in the upper left hand corner, when I click login, you'll see it spin. So it's actually sending data back to the server and the response is coming back. Within Chrome, there's also a network tab under these developer tools. And again, we got to developer tools by right clicking on the page and going to inspect. So by clicking that, it opened up this little box. I'm going to click on the network tab. And you'll see there's some stuff in here. I'm going to go ahead and hit this little clear button, clear it all out. And then let's just click the login button on our page again. And what this is doing is it's actually going to show us the actions that are happening behind the scenes in the browser at the network level. So here's the login. When we click that link, it did a post back to login, which it's hard to kind of see here. Let me do it. There we go. So it did a post back to login, which went to /account/login. And if we open this up, we can actually see what data was sent back to the server. So here's the general information around the request, the URL that it posted to, the method that it used, the status code that was returned back from the server, and then the remote server address. Since I'm running locally, this is IPv6. I'm going to skip the response header for a moment and look at the request header. So here is the request header data. So what's happening here is it's talking about the request that's being sent from the browser back to the server. It's telling the server what kind of content it accepts. It also accepts encoding of that content in gzip or deflate. This is compression. The language that your computer understands or is defaulted to. So I'm in the United States and I speak English, and that's what my computer settings are set to. So it passes that information along as well. The computer or the server can use this data to figure out what type of content to send. We have different types of cache control and connection requests. There's the content length of the content being sent. There's the host that is being requested. And then the referrer URL is where the request came from, as well as the user agent, which is the type of browser I'm using. So you'll see through here that's Mozilla 5.0 based on Windows NT 10, which because I'm running Windows 10 on a 64-bit operating system. The Apple WebKit is the engine for the browser. So if you didn't know this, Google Chrome actually is built on top of WebKit. WebKit is Apple's open source browser technology. So if you're using a Mac and you're running Safari and Chrome use the same engine that was developed by Apple. So there you go. So then we're running Chrome 47, which is the version that kind of broke there. There we go, that's a little better. Chrome 47, blah, 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 blah. And it's running Safari 53736 as the subsystem. So there's that whole Safari, Apple, Google Chrome thing. So there you go. And everything's based off of Mozilla 5.0. Mozilla, Firefox, Netscape, all of that. So everybody's kind of mingled together using each other's technologies to make all of this work. So it's always fun to look at those user agents and kind of know a little bit of the backstory of how they all come to be. I digress. So form data is the actual data from our buttons. So username maps to the username box, password maps to the password box, and login is our button. So right now everything's empty. So I'm going to go ahead and type in just some general. I'm going to say Kevin and then password as my password. I'm going to hit login again. So let me clear this out. I'm going to hit login, and there's the same response request, the network traffic. I'm going to click on login, and now if we come back down to form data, we'll see that the username of Kevin and the password of password is the data from my form that's being sent to the server. So that data is getting picked up, and then we can process that data on the server side in our controller. And that'll be the topic of the next lecture.